So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Greg Bone. I am one of the training advisors at the Personnel Board. And today we'll be talking about how to give and receive feedback. How to give and receive feedback. So over the next 20 to 30 minutes, you have the ability to chat with me through the chat feature in Zoom. So I'll encourage you to do that as we go through a few slides on how to give and receive feedback. So here's a stat that I saw earlier that states that 27% of employees think the feedback that they're getting right now, help them to do their work better. So I'll encourage you leaders, so great leaders like us, now is the time to really engage with our team and give effective feedback. And I'm going to go through some pointers to show you how do we do that, because there are some differences in how to just give feedback and give constructive feedback, and then give feedback to our supervisors. So there are some things that we need to be aware of and how we make this happen and how we go about giving feedback. So let's get started with this today. So when giving feedback, here's the thing. Feedback is best served when it's fresh. It's got to be fresh. When you see that behavior or that action that you want to enforce, that's the time to give feedback. And here's some pointers down here at the bottom. It said, when good work or resourceful behavior made a positive impact to your team, to your organization, someone interacting with you and your team or your business, that's the time to give some good feedback, positive feedback about that behavior. When that behavior will improve your organization, you want to reinforce that skill set or that personal development of that behavior that you'd like to see more often. That's a great time to serve that fresh feedback. When your employee is expecting it, then everybody, comes to work, with a sign on their chest saying, hey, make me feel good today. So that's an awesome opportunity to give some feedback. So remember, feedback is best served when it's fresh, okay? And we're looking at that behavior or that action that you want to reinforce. So remember those things as we move forward, okay? So here's some handy things that we need to know about feedback, okay? We want to make sure that we are observing that behavior. Remember, it's the behavior that we're looking for. And what's the impact on that behavior? And then what are the actions we want that teammate of ours to keep doing, okay? So it's easy to give feedback when we have regular check-ins. So if that's not a part of your management style right now, I'll encourage you to have some regular check-ins. Have some regular times in your schedule that you're going to get with your team or someone on your team that you just want to sit down and have a conversation with. Sometimes it's not about business. It's about, what's going on with that person that's on my team, things that you're observing, number one. What's the impact that you want that behavior, okay, to how it's going to impact your business? And then what are the actions or the actionable things that you want to reinforce with that teammate to keep getting that output from that particular person? So there are some different models, and we're going to talk about a couple today, but we want you just to remember those three steps. What do you observe, the behavior or the action? What's the impact? We want you to communicate about that impact, not about the person, about the impact of that particular behavior, the action that particular behavior has on your business, and three, that action. What do you want to reinforce or have that particular teammate of yours to reinforce so that your team continues to get that behavior, that positive behavior, okay? So when we talk about constructive feedback, a lot of times there are things that you notice in your observation that is not what you want to continue. So how do you give and where do you give the constructive feedback? Number one, when you observe something that's detrimental to your team or your organization or through your customer service or someone visiting your business, again, it's served fresh, but you want to make sure that the timeliness of what you're doing is in the best interest of the person that you're giving constructive feedback to, as well as the trust that you've built or building with that particular individual. So trust is a key component to how you give constructive feedback, whether it's received well or not. We'll get into that in a little while as we talk about feedback and receiving it. But I've got a good couple of pointers I want to give to you as we talk about that later on. So giving constructive feedback can be challenging for most experienced managers, but remember, if you've built trust with that particular person that you're giving constructive feedback, and that constructive feedback is about what you observe, what the observation is in terms of the impact on your business or organization or your team, and the actions that you want to reinforce, it can be and will be given effectively if you've built that trust. Okay, so keep those things in mind. And then here's some pointers. So ideally, that feedback should be given when it's fresh, remember, but you want to give it as soon as possible. And you want to be specific about how you give it and when you give it, okay? So when that behavior is a negative impact on the team, of course you want to give it right then and there, but you may want to pull that person that has the behavior that's detrimental to your organization or your team aside. You don't want to do that in public, okay? When will it improve the person's skills? So you need to think about, hey, what are some solutions that I need to give? I just witnessed this behavior, but what are the solutions that I need to give this teammate so that this behavior that I've noticed starts to change and not be detrimental to the organization? Or when is it going to be an issue that I have to start documenting things for performance? And so all of those things come into play. Remember the trust. Remember, it's about the behavior or the action that you've witnessed, and then come up with some action steps on the things that you need to do to change that particular behavior. So here's a handy feedback model. The regular check-ins we talked about, okay? It's great to do that. Give constructive feedback in those regular check-ins. Don't give feedback in group settings or by email, okay? This is something that should be done face-to-face, okay? Done privately, face-to-face, and then giving it by phone could be okay if that's the only option. So like right now, everybody's remote, so giving feedback face-to-face, whether it's Zoom, may be a good way to do it, or you may want to pick up the phone and call that person a little while later and say, hey, what I observed was, here's how the impact on that behavior it continues can be unhealthy for the team or the organization. And here are some things I need to think of or help you with. What do you think some things are that you need to work with and work on to make sure that we don't see this on a continuing basis, okay? So again, it's about what you observe, the behavior, the action, the impact on that person, on the communication with the team. Again, it's the behavior, and then the action steps that you'll need to have in place or help that teammate of yours to remedy so that that behavior doesn't continue. All right. So if you got some questions, guys, you can chat with me again in the chat box, and look forward to getting those. So when we talk about constructive feedback, here are some things that we need to remember. Number one, we've got to be specific. What is it that you observe? Okay. Stay with that. Stay with what you observe. Be specific about it. Then focus on the desired behavior. Okay. What is it that you want to change? What behavior is it that you want to have a different outcome? Okay. So don't just stay focused on the person or the personal things or things that happened 6 months ago. Focus on the behavior. Okay. Then get into the details, the benefits about, hey, when you make this change or when this thing stops or that behavior that I've noticed, when you adjust it, here's what the impact is and the benefits of making this change for you, for the organization as a whole. Okay? And then invite input. Get some buy-in from that person that's on your team regarding that behavior that you're talking about. Okay? We've got some examples in those boxes there. This one talks about when you get to the details, meeting deadlines, and elevating your status as a customer service leader. So you've got to find out, well, hey, when you make this change, here's what you're going to mean to the organization, or here's what making this change is going to mean to the team. And then when it comes to inviting input, you want to ask those open-ended questions. Tell me what you think. Describe what that's going to look like. You know, give me some input of what success is going to feel like for you. What are the things that you believe that you can add value to so that this behavior doesn't become something that's a negative for you? So find ways to ask those open-ended questions with that particular teammate so that you get the best out of that feedback situation. So here's one that is, I always get this question about, how do I give feedback to my supervisor or people that are above me? So we've got a bit of a challenge at times with this one, because sometimes those in higher leadership positions may not feel the need to receive feedback from someone on their team that's in a lower position or have a lower title sometimes as they are. So here's some key points that we need to be aware of as it talks about giving feedback up the chain, okay? So managers shouldn't be the only ones that are giving feedback. Anyone on the team should be able to give feedback and not be intimidated by doing so. But it's key in how you do it. There's a skill set in how you give feedback up. I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I was listening to the former CFO of Jefferson County on a radio show, and he was talking about the sewer debt and things like that. And he came up on our floor and he was just talking, just general conversation. And I mentioned that I'd heard him on the radio. And I asked, I said, can I give you a couple of things that were important to me? And he was open to it, of course. He said, yeah, you know, what is it? I said, now I understood what you were talking about as it relates to the bond ratings and the different levels. I said, but your average person listening to that show didn't have a clue of what you were talking about. So the next time you go on, if you would talk in not so much the financial language, but you would break it down and make it simple for the everyday person to understand how it impacts their paycheck, then that would be better received on the community than just the financial service minded people that are listening to you. So when you get to understand what I was doing, this is the first step, okay? If it was not requested, then you should ask that manager would they like feedback from you. And in this particular case, it wasn't something that was requested. I asked, could I tell you how, you know, listening to you on the radio provided the information for me versus someone else that didn't have the background or the everyday person that was listening to him. So ask, number one, ask your manager or that person if they would like your feedback. Number two, share what you observed or heard and the associated impact. Here's what I've heard. Here's the impact on what you said, because a lot of times at that upper level, they have more information and they're communicating, but sometimes there's a disconnect with getting the job done and how you hear things versus how it's actually done. So you're concerned about what is being heard. Be sure to express that and the impact on the association or the team or organization from your standpoint versus the leader's standpoint. So that's number two. Number three, ask questions. Hey, is there a reason that we didn't do this? Or is there a reason this was omitted? Or is there a reason, this happened? Or is there a reason we're having multiple meetings about this? You have to ask questions. And then the last thing you want to do when you're giving feedback up the chain is ask, was the feedback helpful? You know, did you understand my point of view from the person that has to execute it? Did you think my input would be helpful to the organization? Again, ask the open-ended questions so that you get the details, not just a yes or no answer. Okay? So that's some of the quick steps about giving feedback up the chain. So let's look at some tips in general. Tips in general about giving feedback upward. Be certain, number one, your manager is open to receiving feedback before giving it. Give feedback with the intent, to help your manager improve or to help the organization improve. Don't offer your opinion on the right next steps unless you're invited to do so. Again, you may not have all the information, so giving your opinion about next steps may be useless, so be mindful of that. Consider what objections your manager may have to your point of view, okay, and be prepared to address it. The next one is don't share what you would do if you were the manager, because you're not the manager and it's not about you. And then if the feedback is senseless, excuse me, and will provide a negative impact on your relationship, don't give it. Look for ways to improve or provide anonymous feedback. So those are some great quick tips there. So let's look at the do's and don'ts about giving feedback. Do's and don'ts about giving feedback. Number one, do plan what your conversation is going to look and feel like. Plan it in advance. Now, this says don't do the sandwich model. A lot of people like the sandwich model, the positive up front, the negative in the middle, and the positive at the end. We teach that in our classes. There are 5 different models that we teach, and the sandwich model is one of them. So in this particular slide presentation, they say, hey, don't give this. But if that's what you're comfortable with doing, find a way to use it and use it effective in constructive feedback. The next one, do provide feedback with intent to be helpful. Okay? Be helpful. Don't assume that your feedback will be welcome, especially if you haven't built the trust. If you haven't built the trust, it may not be welcome. Also, find out when it's a good time to give feedback. If I've just had an accident and I'm late and I've got a presentation in 5 minutes, giving me constructive feedback about why I'm late may not be the best time if I've got to go in the next 5 minutes, get the computer up, make sure my slides are working, make sure I have sound in my classroom, all of those things. So it may be a better time later in the afternoon. Or if you have a person on your team that's not a morning person or not an evening person, you got to find out when that person is at their best and give feedback at that time. Again, those are some of the things that you're going to find out when you have those regular visits with your teammate, and when what you observed and the intent and action, all of those things come into play there. The next one, keep your cool. Okay, give feedback when you know all the facts and once heated emotions have settled. Okay, so don't assume you have all the information. Be mindful that you have to collect everything. And again, it's about the behavior, what you observe, the impact on the organization, and the actions that you want that particular person to take. Next thing, you want to offer solutions. Okay, offer solutions, be constructive, ask for the person's input. You want to listen, be an effective listener, and you want to give suggestions. Okay, don't provide constructive feedback by email or in front of a group. Not a good idea. Okay, the next one, make your feedback timely and specific. The next one is keep a record. We talk about documenting. And a lot of times when we get to performance evaluations and things, we only have negative things that are in our performance. So there should be some positive things that you had. And if you're doing your regular check-ins, providing feedback on the positive and constructive things should be included in that report. Be aware of your body language. A lot of times this is what creates the tension. So you want to give me constructive feedback, but you got an angry posture. Okay, so be mindful of that as you're having that particular one-on-one with your person. Okay. No, I don't have coronavirus. I'm just yelling in this microphone for whoever chatted with me, Tracy Nance. Thank you very much. Little humor, y'all, little humor. All right. So feedback is a gift. Remember that. It's a gift. It can be challenging, but you get better at it the more you give it. Okay? So take time, think about what you're going to say, plan it out. You know, think about those pointers I just gave you about giving feedback, positive feedback, giving constructive feedback, and then giving feedback up the chain, you know, upper level. So honest feedback delivered with intent will be helpful to whoever you're giving it to, so they'll grow and it'll be a valuable gift to them. Guys, there's a lot more information about giving and receiving feedback. If you follow that link that I provided for you, www.saba.com/resources, you will find a wealth of information that's there, not just on giving and receiving feedback, but some other HR things that you may need to have and incorporate in your team and your organization. Again, I want to thank you guys for participating with us today. We wanted to keep this short and sweet, but give you some tools that can help you as you move forward. I'll look at the chat here to see if I have any questions. And if not, guys, we'll end our conversation for today. No questions at the moment. Hopefully you've got one or two nuggets from giving and receiving feedback that's going to help you and your organization, guys. Again, look at that resource and find some things that'll help you and your team. Have a great day, everybody. We look forward to seeing you in our next webinar.